for having me, Rae. What an introduction.
And I almost pass out after the intro because you're sort of going to get it all in. But, you know, it's like it's not about me. It's all about you.
Oh, well, it was great. It was wonderful to listen to.
Did I represent you okay?
Absolutely. It was wonderful. I've got a lot to live up to now.
Well, the bit about kindness and care is so true. It's something that runs so close to my heart in my industry, being around what it feels like being people. We often miss just being kind can be the very thing that saves a life.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it is so important to be kind and caring, and just remember that we're all just humans. We're all just people, you know.
And adaptable.
Yeah, exactly.
As well.
Yeah.
But I always start the show around how we met each other, because it's always random how I meet people. Could be on a train. It could be on a plane, anywhere. My headphones are just doing something a bit silly at the moment. Anyway, so in November last year, I turned up on a film set. I wasn't starring in the show at this stage, and but introducing my then 4-month-old granddaughter to the sights, smells, scenes of the entertainment industry here in Australia, little Evelyn. And her screen mum came along and so beautifully took Evelyn away for her first little show, and it was you.
Yeah. It's always amazing playing a mother on a TV show, particularly when it's a really young baby, because you're presented, you know, like, I don't know how productions find. I'm curious to hear how they found you and your granddaughter, Evelyn, you know, to be an actor or a TV baby. And so you're kind of just waiting to see what you're presented with. And the parents and grandparents or carers of the baby are always on set as well. And it's such a delicate thing because you need to do your job and you need to focus and do that really well. But then you're also just handling a newborn baby and often a new mother. And so it's always this added level of stress often. But it was lovely. It was so nice to...
But, you know, just even on top of that, when you say added level of stress, it never actually occurred to me on the day that you might even feel stressed yourself about remembering lines or anything like that. It was just like, wow, my grandchild is being so beautifully looked after. And Evelyn's a crier, Rose, if you're listening, and Evelyn. But as soon as she got with you, she was absolutely fine. And we were so impressed.
Oh, look, she's a baby. That's what babies do. They cry. And look, I think the director, Jeff Walker, of the series we were shooting, he has children. He's shot shows with a lot of children, and I think he was the perfect person for the job because he would just like, the babies will cry. Let's just see how we go, get what we can. So it was quite relaxed in that regard. But look, I've worked with a lot of babies, so I won't say I'm a natural, but I've just had experience.
Well, we felt very, very blessed. They say something about children and animals in acting. It's like don't work with them. Is that right?
Yeah, they say don't work with animals or children.
Yeah.
And I've worked with both. And it can be really hard. I've definitely had, often you have, I did a TV show where I was playing a mother of a newborn. Actually, it was a mother of 3, but one of the children was a newborn. It was Stateless, a series on Netflix, and they often give you twins. So then if the baby's crying, they'll swap them out, or if one throws up on you or whatever. So you're often dealing, but I had on this show, I had 2 sets of twins. So I had 4 babies that I was rotating. So it was high risk just working with just one baby, but they were short scenes at least. There's good rules and laws in Victoria around shooting with children and children working, so they get lots of breaks and you're not, you know, stressing out the children.
But on that, how do you balance all of that? So you're not only managing sometimes 2 babies or 4 and the parents and possibly the grandparents, and then having to be exemplary yourself. How do you do that?
I don't know, with a lot of focus and energy. It's an interesting thing, particularly with the new mothers. I'm always very aware of what that experience must be for them. You know, they've agreed to be part of a TV show. Often they're not from the industry, and you know, they just rock up to this set. And for people, I think, who haven't been on TV sets or movie sets, I imagine it'd be quite overwhelming because there's a lot more people than you'd expect. It's usually, 50, sometimes 100 people. There's trucks, there's vans, everyone's got, walkie-talkies, and there's just so much going on. And, I imagine coming from having a newborn, which is quite a quiet, intimate experience, going to this really kind of chaotic environment. So I'm always very aware of the parents being there and just making sure that they're aware that I won't, I'll hold the baby, okay, and I'll look after their baby because they are handing over this newborn baby to a stranger technically.
Yeah, vulnerable.
It's so vulnerable. So and I've got lots of friends with babies. I've had lots of babies, so I know that I can hold a baby. But yeah, I'll make sure that I get to know the parents and the guardians, it's always lovely as well. Yeah. And that's how we connected. Yeah. But there's that. And then I just make sure that I'm really on top of all my lines and I'm really feeling super confident and prepared for the day because if you're on the back foot, adding a baby or any other extra things are just going to throw you. So, yeah, I just make sure I'm super prepared. And also I don't know, look, maybe it's experience, but I just know we'll get what we get on the day, and you can't be too precious about it because you might do an amazing take and really feel like you're in it and you've nailed it, and then the baby might be crying the whole time through it and you don't even, so you just kind of, you got to let go of control, I think, in those scenarios. Yeah.
That's good advice for anyone who's listening in, I actually do a lot of extra work and find myself on lots of different sets.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
great.
It's how I manage my mental health.
Yeah.
Radio is part of it. So when I'm, deal with quite a lot of very gnarly things during the week. So to sort of just, pepper it with all these different joyful things.
How fabulous.
But that's a whole other story. But part of the story as well, when we're on set this day, I was filming you in the first take. Going, oh, I'm so proud of Evelyn. Oh my gosh, she's so good.
She was amazing. She does have star quality.
She does. And so my son George was actually in the air flying to London where he's now living. So it was quite an emotional day with, George leaving, and he landed in Abu Dhabi, and so we're texting each other. I said, oh, look at Evelyn, in her first scene. And then he gets back to me and says, oh, I know her, being you, Maria. That's my friend Maria. I went, what? How could this be? And so then I spoke to you later. I said, oh, my son says that he knows you. He's just landed in Abu Dhabi. And then you said, yes, George. And, that's a story in itself, in your partner, John, and what he's created. And, George, back when he was 15, worked with an establishment called Pizza Religion. Mm-hmm. And that was, one of his first entrees into the world of chefing, which he now works in, and had such a great experience of the Peasnell brothers and that whole establishment. And then went on to help them set up their establishment called Dexter and things like that. Yeah. And then that's how they met John.
Yes. So my partner John has a restaurant and a bowling alley.
Go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Please, and please don't get confused. It's not your bowling centre that has your chips on the side.
No, it's got really, really good food. I actually ate there last night. It's got they have a kiosk out the front in their beer garden that has some rotating guest chefs as well. So they're churning out really amazing food. But yeah, it's like a bistro bar, and there's a bowling alley there as well. It's all vintage. It's called the Keys Leisure Centre. It's amazing. It's and he also has a restaurant in the city, and George came and did some pop-up guest chef nights there, and he also did some fundraising for mental health in the hospitality industry. And I remember meeting George and being so impressed by his skill, professionalism, and just his enthusiasm, and also being so active in the industry. And when I realised how young he was, I was even more impressed. He's a really amazing guy. And, but I meet so many people in my life. I kind of, we follow each other on Instagram and we'd see each other here or there. But I kind of, he's one of those people that I see every year or so. Yeah. And then it was so funny that you're his mother out there, and I'm holding his little niece. That's right. I'm pretending she's my daughter on a TV show. It's such a small world, isn't it? It's amazing.
And I love that about life as well. It's because you're never far away from joy.
No, never. And it makes you think that, if you hadn't been texting George that day, we might never have known that connection, and it just makes you think that there must be so many of those connections that we experience all day, but maybe we don't know them, or we don't get to realize them in the time, and we are all so much more connected than we think. Yeah,
that's right. And I think human beings often forget that curiosity is just such an amazing attribute to have, or just something to realize that's inside all of us and to activate it.
Yeah.
Because if we're not curious, we're not finding out anything.
No.
And, people love being asked questions, although, in this day and age, we're very hesitant about imposing upon people or asking the wrong things, so we don't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, it's funny, I was talking about it with a friend of mine yesterday.
At the Keys.
Oh, no, before I went to the Keys, actually, at a birthday. I had a very social day yesterday. But yeah, we were talking about the danger of people being afraid of saying the wrong thing, because a friend of hers was going through a hard time, and it's that thing of being scared to say the wrong thing so people don't say anything. And I think that can be so dangerous, because when someone's going through a hard time, I think I'd prefer to say the wrong thing and be there for them rather than not say anything. It is interesting. Anyway, I could go on.
Well,
on
you
could.
No, this is where I go all over the place, because I have certain things that I'd really like to know. But I remember George, talking about this Maria person. He goes, "Oh, Mum, she was in We Can Be Heroes, or the Chris Lilley shows," and we loved the Chris Lilley shows. Like, we still reference them in our life. However, quite jaw-dropping in that kind of dialogue, and I mean, it's so much so that all of his shows have been taken off Netflix. And
they're quite problematic when you really look at that. I mean, not everything, but there's things that I don't think would fly now. Yeah.
Well, were you about 18?
16.
16.
Yeah.
Oh. So for those of you that know the show, Maria played the friend of Jemaine King, who was a philanthropic narcissist, pretty much, is probably the best way you could describe her, but has also been described as, just a really good depiction of what it can look like for people to create an awareness around what it might be like for females of that age in the school institution.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Chris Lilley was really clever with, yes, it's satire, and yes, he's making fun of these heightened, often narcissistic or megalomaniac characters. But he does touch on, Jemaine is this private school girl, and he's smart enough to really explore those dynamics, and, doing this kind of, the 40-hour famine, but also using it as a way to kind of highlight Jemaine's body issues and eating disorder issues and all of these kind of, it was very, very clever. And I think he did that with most of his characters, where he explored these kind of cross sections of, it's like silly, absurd comedy, but then there was quite a lot of reality and pathos in a lot of the characters, which is, I think, what made the show.
Well, that's right. If you
good.
If you sit without judgment in it, it really, really does challenge you and challenges your beliefs, which is, I think in terms of, raw comedy that now gets edited and, largely criticised because of its incorrectness. When we're not being challenged anymore about our feelings and our beliefs and our values. And I think, it really does have a place.
Look, I agree with you, Rae. I think, I am predominantly a comedic actress. I do a lot of drama though as well. But and I write, but predominantly I write comedy. And I do think that nothing should be off the table with storytelling and comedy. I think we just have to be really mindful and clever with it. You don't want to obviously punch down, but I think it is dangerous to censor too much of what we say or be too, because that's why art exists, to express and to challenge people and to convey things that maybe can't be explained in other ways. And so I think it is, we've got to be careful with that. It is tricky, and I think it's good that things are changing, but I think the pendulum is swinging quite far the other way, and we need to find some balance. And I'm sure we will. I think that happens. But it is interesting. Look, when you watch shows, particularly Chris Lilley's stuff, you're like, oh, that would never get made now.
No. I'm so glad it's
with
there.
Good reason. But then it is, there is like, you don't want to be, it's a tricky thing to navigate, but I think hopefully we don't lose. I feel like sometimes when we're being so self-aware with stories we're telling or comedy we're doing, we often handbrake. We're just handbraking creativity as we go because we're too aware of what other people are thinking. And
or too scared.
Yeah, and I think we should, the whole, purpose of being an artist is to express freely. And I think you don't want to be, limiting that. So
no.
In fact,
I had another comedian on the show, Lisa Sharp. You might know Lisa.
Yeah.
Because I think you're connected
somehow. Yes, I know Lisa. She's lovely. She's amazing.
Lisa. Yeah. Lisa and I met in a park.
I can see you getting along. I love that.
And she stopped me one day. This is, could be a couple of years ago now. And she stopped me because I walk my dog at Ruffy Lake Park in Donvale. And she said, "Oh, I see you all the time and you just look like a person I want to talk to."
Oh, what a legend.
So that's when we started talking, and she's been on the show. I've been to see her perform. And, again, if we're talking about females in entertainment, it's such a curiosity because you can see how far women have come. However, when you look at statistics, and I love a statistic, not far enough.
Oh, no.
Not nearly.
Baby steps. We got a long way. It's systemic, this stuff. It's
But then there's, if we look at things like when we're doing the gender replacement stuff, in like you get a classic and then you change what's that called?
I don't know, but reversing the genders or
reverse gender,
modernizing something or
and do you think that's because we're trying to include women more, or is it just a creative spin?
I think it depends. I think it can work really well, and I think I do think it can. Yeah, I think sometimes it is used creatively, and sometimes I think it's just trying to push back. I think it works really well, and sometimes it does feel tokenistic, and maybe I do like the retelling of some stories because I often, when I watch things like that, I imagine 10-year-old Maria watching it and being super inspired, you know, and that would have been amazing to see that. But then there is an element sometimes where I'm like, it still feels like a male story that's just being told with females around. I'd like to just have a new, fresh story from a women's perspective, if that makes sense. So I think, it really depends on how it's done and how it's, how it's reinterpreted, I guess.
Yeah, and you're right. If it was positioned as a creative spin, then that's palatable. But if it's just because of the gender parody thing, then it's sort of like, oh, why?
Yeah, and it just feels a bit tokenistic, like they're ticking a box here, or if they haven't. Yeah, it's I mean, it's all. Sometimes I feel like it's similar to that kind of. Often when you see sometimes women in power, they kind of have had to join the boys' club a little bit, and they and it's great to see women in power. I'm all for it. Yeah. But sometimes, often they are women that have had to kind of appropriate this kind of masculine approach to how they present or how they work or how they achieve things. And I feel like sometimes when we do that with storytelling, when we replace male characters with female characters, it's a similar thing where, the woman can be the lead if she's acting like a man, or if it's from a masculine point of view, where I'm not saying we can't do that. I'm all for it. Go for it. We've had enough men as leads, but it also is so refreshing when we see female leading stories or females in power that are feminine and powerful, and I think I wouldn't call myself a Swiftie. Like, I don't really know that many. Don't come at me. But I bet she is quite a feminine female that is
clearly powerful.
And I think that's why, some people struggle with her as well, because she's, and I think we have fewer of really feminine, strong females.
Yeah, and when we're trying to replace male roles with females, it's another form of exclusion and discrimination, really, because it's saying women aren't good enough to actually create their own space. We need them to pop them into already male created positions. And like, as you said, in corporate, it's the same, that females aren't being recognised for their strength and power as females, more that we have to, parrot men. Yeah. For me, I feel very fortunate working in a man's space that I've never experienced any of it.
Yeah, of course.
That's because I'm a person who happens to be a female.
Yes, yeah. And I think sometimes we've got to be careful also just with, I'm all for diversity and changing the narrative 100%. But when it does feel tokenistic, and I'm aware it's quite a privileged position to say this, but I think we are all just human. Like, it is just sometimes when we give ourselves all these separate labels, I think it in a way can highlight what our differences are, not what our similarities are. And I think sometimes the way of healing and moving forward is actually seeing us as all connected rather than all separate. So it is it's a tricky thing, but yeah, I don't know. I could go on and on.
Well, we could, but I guess, it's always good to discuss these things again because we're curious about it. And, evolution is an amazing thing about human beings because we just keep on doing it. Yeah. People say, oh, I wish things were like they used to be. Well, no, because we have to evolve. Otherwise, we'd be still living in caves or riding horses to work. Yeah. Which would probably do wonders for the environment.
I know. I was just going to say that sounds so relaxing not having my phone around.
So fast forward to now, and there's a lot in between. But speaking of the feminist narrative, you recently have starred in a binge series called Strife. Yes. Alongside the divine Asher Keddie. But evidently Strife is an adaptation of Mia Freeman's memoir Work, Strife, Balance. Yes. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So it tells the story of her starting the website Mamma Mia back from her lounge room, which sounds like a very male kind of experience, and I don't think anyone really knows that story.
No, it was in I think it was 2012 that it was when print media was really struggling, and so she was the first person to be like, well, maybe we'll put the magazine online. And you see it in the show. I think they've Sarah Scheller, who wrote the show, who is a showrunner, amazing screenwriter. Hilarious. She also wrote The Let Down, which was great.
Oh, yeah.
She's amazing. She really highlighted that thing. There was a lot of dialogue of all the men in the show being like, oh, your little website. And she's like, no, it's an online magazine.
That's right, yeah.
And I think it was that thing where now we're all so aware of online magazines. It's such a thing. But even is it Rolling Stone now is just only online even? Yep. Mm-hmm. But, so it was just about that kind of – because I guess Mia Freeman was one of the pioneers to do that. Yes. And I think because it was a women's magazine, it was treated in a very particular way as well. Mia was one of the executive producers on the show as well. So she was quite involved. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. That's really great. Because I really enjoyed it. I mentioned to you when we were sort of chatting that I started watching going, oh, this is just going to be such a feminist rant. Yes. And it's not at all.
No, and I think I was a bit worried too that, this kind of like girl bossification kind of, I don't know. It felt like something that we'd explored, and I was worried that it would be a bit, I don't know. Not that I don't want to judge I was just concerned that it's often women's stories get such a small window of opportunity that I was like, I'm always like, don't mess it up, and I think I was worried that it would be this kind of twee kind of girl boss thing, but I think it was really, again, it's a testament to Sarah Scheller, who wrote it, but also Asher Keddie was a producer on it, Stuart Bowen, who directed it, and me being open to having her story told in her not being kind of portrayed in an amazing light. I think they were really clever with how they explored and told the story, and I was really happy. I feel like they made it really interesting. It's still a really fun, easy watch, but they
it's a bit frustrating actually. Asher Keddie just is like, please just calm down.
Yes, her character is so infuriating.
Do you like when you're working on a show, because it takes bloody forever?
Yes.
Like if I'm an extra on a show, they go, "Oh, can we watch it next week?" It's like maybe next year.
Yeah, yeah. That was actually quite a quick turnaround. Like we shot it in, I think it was March, April, May of last year, and it came out in November, which is very, very quick. Usually, like I just shot a film that I worked on, wrapped a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think it will come out for another year. Yeah. You know, which is usually how it goes.
Is that like a movie?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
How exciting.
Very exciting.
But if you're working on a show, do you ever get surprised at the final product or not all that happy about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think I've been around enough to know that you just never know. You know,
Do you get any say in it along the way to go, I'm not comfortable with that?
Well, I've worked on shows in the past where I've been like, this feels amazing. This is going to be the best thing ever. And then you watch it and you're like, oh. Or the opposite where you're like, oh my goodness, this is going to be awful. And then you watch it and you're like, oh, this is good. Yeah. So much happens in post-production, in the editing and the sound mixing and how they piece all the footage together that often you can rewrite a whole show in an edit. Yeah. So I'm very aware that you just don't know, but you can feel sometimes how something's going. Yeah. And you do get a say. I think the older I get and the more confident I get with speaking up and questioning things. And also I think the bigger the roles I play, I have more authority, I guess. When I started out, you know, you
get a chair with your name on it and stuff.
No, look, I'm not there yet. But I feel like people are a little more open to listening to you. But, you know, you do your research. Usually when I get offered a role, I'll do some deep diving into who's making it, who the directors or often I think it's happened on the last few jobs I've done. If it's a director that I've never worked with, they can send you, often they make these kind of like little sizzle reels or kind of mood reels of what the show's going to be like and how it's going to be edited, and it gives you a bit of hope or a bit of an idea of how they're going to present the tone of the show, which helps. But look, often you don't get a say. As an actor, it's such a funny thing. You're kind of there in the face of it, and but you don't know how it's going to be edited. You don't know how it's all going to come across. I do. Some actors don't like to, but I really like to. If there's an opportunity and if it's going to help the work we're doing, I like to watch the takes back sometimes, or if I can, and that gives you a good idea. But often you don't know. You just have to trust all the people you're working with. And
that's right. Yeah. I was looking through box office hits, the gazillion dollar budgets that didn't make anywhere near it, and you think about those productions where you go, oh, how disappointing.
I know, and I think about it. Sometimes you watch a show and you're like, how did no one see that this was terrible, or how did no one stop that from happening, or but I guess it's hard, and I've had it before on jobs, talking with my co-stars or whatever, and you're like, is this going to be good? And you're like, no one's going to tell us. And everyone's so, sometimes in those environments people aren't terribly honest because you don't want to tell someone, oh, you're doing a bad job, or so you have to really trust yourself, trust the directors you're working with, and sometimes also just know the kind of job you're doing. Sometimes some jobs you do aren't going to be they're not going to change the world. They're not going to be, but that's okay. Yeah. Like as well, I think we sometimes can get so precious, and particularly in the entertainment industry as actors, we think we're, they're so noble, everything's so important. It's like, it is just a job. Well, it is, it's
but also you don't know who you're reaching as well.
Exactly.
And we do have to go to a break.
Yeah.
But before we do, I just wanted to mention, I said to you before, during the week, I was very fortunate to teach a Year 11 psychology class, which was...
How fabulous.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of a Jamaican scene.
I hope they weren't that mean.
But I did use you to sort of to as a bit of an icebreaker, because I was talking about all the things that I do.
Yeah.
This is I mean, I don't even teach. So And I mentioned that you were coming on the show, and I said, has anyone seen Strife? And this girl rips her hand up and goes, yeah, I'm watching that with my mum.
Aww.
And I know her. She's great. I went, I'll be sure to tell her.
Oh, how lovely.
So there you go. You never know who you're influencing.
No, you don't.
But if we're curious to find out, that's a good thing. So speaking of curiosity, Maria, we come to our first break in the show where I prepare to play our very first guest, special guest is, song request. So it's based on a list that's been personally selected by you.
Yeah.
But it's a time where I like to have a bit of fun. So it's really dumb fun, by the way.
Okay, go for it.
So I provide you with a cryptic clue, which sometimes isn't all that cryptic, it's just terrible, to help it announce your first song. So you have to work out which one it is.
Okay.
So it could have something to do with the artist, the song, or the album title.
Okay.
So here, ready?
Yep.
Something that helps create a smooth horizontal camera movement. Think about it.
Oh.
Got it?
Yep, I know what song it is.
You have to say what it is.
Okay, it is Wildflowers by Dolly Parton.
Bing, bing, bing.
Yay!
Correct. How cool is that? So that was quite a good clue.
I was like a Dolly. No, at first I was like a track. Dolly, great. Dolly Parton.
So when we come back, I'd like to rewind all the way back to Mini Maria and where it all started, so people can know how you got here. How did you get to the studios of 3WBC with me?
Right, great.
I know you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC, and we will be right back. Welcome back. The time is just 20 minutes to 11, and you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC with Rae Bonney, and Australian actor, writer and creator or producer, or both.
Whatever you want to call me.
Maria Gloria Grace Angelico. Now, is that your real name?
Yes. It does sound like a prayer or something, but yes, that is my full
beautiful.
name.
Like my kids, George's name is George Henry Bonney Wintle.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds quite regal.
Yeah. And Rory is Rory Reg Bonney Wintle.
Oh, Reg, I love that name.
Yeah. I met Reg on a train. He's passed away now, but yeah, that was he became a very big feature in our lives, old Reg. But back to you. In this intro, I just wanted to mention that you're very well known for your lead role in a mini-series called Sisters.
Yeah.
Which I also watched and I really liked.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it was fun.
Fabulous. Thanks for watching it.
Yeah, I liked the whole plot of it.
Yeah.
It was kind of, what was that? Something just fell down in the studio. We were just saying about how, you got to be really authentic on air. And
yes.
when shit goes down, you just got to go down with it.
And that was really authentic. We actually planned whatever that was.
We make a great team. We should do more radio together. Now, I heard that role in Sisters was specifically written for you.
Yeah, look, I think I had been working, this was back in 2015, 16. I'd been working in the industry playing, smaller roles, and I was in my 20s and I wrote a web series with a friend of mine. It was more just for fun.
I watched it.
Yeah. Oh,
I
goodness, you've really done your research.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, look, it was I'd never saw myself as a writer. I was like, I'm an actor. I'm just an actor. But my best mate, Rhys Mitchell, who's a filmmaker and actor and comedian.
Yeah. Now, if anyone's watched Upper Middle Bogan,
there you go.
I remember George coming home and going, "Oh my God, Mum, I met him. I met him," because again we identify with that character because we're all redheads,
It's great, Kane. And he played Kane. He's an amazing artist, and he encouraged me to write. He was like, you should just write a show or write something, write a web series. And at that time I was like, what even is a web series? But he said I couldn't swim in his swimming pool at his parents' house until I wrote something. And so I was like, okay. And it was summer, and so I wrote just literally just so I could go over and swim in his pool every day. And I started writing down some stories and just pretending I had all this money to make a TV show, just writing ideas. And then I really loved it, and it actually kept me up at night. I just loved writing. And I shared my scripts with him, and it was more just an exercise. But then he read them and he was like, oh, we could make a web series. This is really he really liked them, and he shared them with some producers and a director, and we ended up, I'd done a TV commercial and I had a little bit of money, really not much at all, and we filmed this web series on a shoestring, and long story short, it was a lot more work, but I'll cut to the chase, but we ended up finishing it and getting some funding from Screen Australia to finish it, which was amazing. They've been so supportive of my career. And it got into Tribeca Film Festival in New York, and it did really well. And it was a big kind of had a big impact on my career, because I wrote this series as about a woman in dance therapy who's trying to better herself, and it's a comedy, but there's some heart in there, and I played the lead character, Sophia. And anyway, it kind of had a bit of a life, and the Imogen Banks, who is an amazing TV producer, she did Offspring and Puberty Blues and every great Australian show, who's just a good friend and I guess mentor of mine. She saw the web series and met with me. She asked for a coffee, and I was just a silly 20-something-year-old, and I didn't really realise how impressive she was. And I was like, I'll have a coffee with this woman. I don't really know who she is. And I remember just before I sat down with coffee with her, I Googled her, and then I flipped out. I was like, she's amazing. And so I was really awkward in this coffee conversation. I was just so nervous. And anyway, we had this coffee. I chatted all about my life, told her a bit about my life story, and then I never heard from her again. And then I was like, she must have thought I was an idiot. And then a year or so later, she'd produced a show about Witches Sisters, and about a young woman who finds out she has sisters because her father, who's an IVF pioneer, used his own
sperm.
I was
we used sperm on the last
program. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
He used it to impregnate all these women, and it's actually based. There's like a lot of true stories about IVF pioneers, like in that,
because there's 70s. a few come out on Netflix. It's
pretty wild. Anyway, it was great, but I think they Imogen and John O'Gavin, who created the show, they must have had the idea for the series, or I'm not sure, but I think from that meeting, look, I can't confirm, but I think they had me in mind to play Julia, and which is so one of those things that that was all happening for a year without me really knowing. Which is such a lovely thing to think that people have you in mind for things that you don't even know about, and anyway, it was a huge, to be a lead in a TV show, and that had a big impact on my career because it sold to Netflix and it was quite popular overseas.
I can't find it anywhere now.
It should be on Australian Netflix. Maybe not. It's okay, maybe it's gone.
No, and it said it could have been somewhere else as well, and it wasn't. Because I wanted to just watch it. I was trying to see if there was any sex scenes in there.
There is.
Yeah. And of course, I want to ask you about intimacy later in the show. So I was looking for that, couldn't find it anywhere.
Okay.
But I did watch. Is it Wonder? The Netflix. The web series.
No, it's called Movement.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Wonder
I was like, what? Yeah, I was like trying to think of a show I did. I'm like, maybe I did something good.
Movement. And it sort of gave me a bit of Bridget Jones flavour.
Yes.
To it. And it's still really relevant because I was watching it going, this would be so good if you had a daughter who'd just moved out of home and was a bit lost.
Yeah.
I thought it was really kind of, as you said, it's got that comedic kind of underlay to it, but then it's real life stuff that you go, there's a scene of you with a washing machine, and I was like, I know this.
Yeah, it's that's really nice to hear, because sometimes when I write things after I've written it, and sometimes, like we were saying, things don't come out till a year later, or, and then by the time the show comes out, I'm like, I'm like a different person now. Like that, it feels irrelevant to me, because often I write about things that are present in my life, and then you grow and move through things, and so it is nice to know it's still relevant. I mean,
you think about things like Grease. Rose and I laugh about this all the time because we're introducing Evelyn to all the Grease songs, but how that still has so much traction.
Yeah.
But all of those actors who are playing, 15 and 16-year-olds are all in their 30s.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I know.
It's like the dumbest thing ever.
Crazy.
But we keep buying it.
Yeah.
We keep buying it because we can relate to it.
Yeah.
And we want to be it.
Yeah. And look, I think so many, you know how we were talking about retelling of old TV shows and movies. I think there is something to be said that a lot of stories are similar stories that we retell in new ways. And I think that's just part of being a human.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, do you know what? Biologically, unfortunately, females still want to buy the Prince Charming story.
Yeah.
And men want to buy the action story.
Yeah.
And that's just how we are.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Which goes back to our first segment around, how do you sort of overcome, some of this gender balance thing and more evenly create pathways.
Yeah.
It's just not about segmenting. It's creating pathways for anyone to have a crack.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is interesting. I've been pretty lucky to work with a lot of female producers and directors.
Yeah.
And so I think it always feels like I've had to do less pushing up against things to,
Was this always a thing for you from when you were little? Because we did promise we'd go back to
yes,
Maria,
we should go back. Look, I was raised by a single mother who was an incredible woman, like all single mothers, really. And I have two sisters, so it was a all-female household.
Yeah.
And apart from our dog. But yeah, so I think just women's stories, women at the centre of things just is something that just was in my nature. I didn't even really think about it. And, my father was absent really my whole life. So, it just seemed like a natural thing to tell women's stories and to care about women's stories and to understand women's dynamics. And so, I think my mum, she'd overcome a lot of she went through some really, my mum was a performer as well, an amazing cabaret artist, a singer and a concert pianist.
In Melbourne?
In Melbourne. She was in Melbourne. She went to the conservatory. She was a concert pianist, so I played all the classical, Chopin. She a bit of a crazy, talented person, she spoke 8 languages, but she lived overseas and performed. She, as my grandmother would say, she went off the rails. And my mum became a bit of a punk and in the 70s lived in Europe and was in a cabaret band called the Busby Berkeleys, and my father was in that as well, so that's how they met. And anyway, when she had us settled back in Australia and me and my sisters and raised us, so she was a performer, but she I think she'd been through a lot with my father. They had quite a tumultuous relationship, and she'd really was quite strong in what she overcame. And so she was really passionate about films and stories about heroic women. And, I was raised on 9 to 5. Hence my Dolly Parton song, just really kind of second wave feminism. And, so that was something that, just felt I just had a really big understanding of it at a very young age. So I think I've always felt confident in that way. And, it's something that I think I even in a way probably took for granted, because I just were like, women can be strong, women can do anything.
But was the performing thing
performing?
Part of you?
Yeah, look, I think being my mother and my father, not that he raised me, but he was also a performer as well.
Doesn't matter if you've never met.
Yeah, it's in my blood, I guess. Yeah. So my dad, so they're both performers, and my mum, raised us. It was such a creative household. We're always singing and dancing and making up songs and performances. And one of my sisters is an incredible singer-songwriter as well. So it was just, it kind of just didn't really have to think about it much. I loved performing, but I did also want to be a fashion designer. So I was either going to be an actor or a fashion designer. And then look, I just, it was something that was quite natural for me in high school. I did all the arts, performing arts, because I just loved being creative. It was something that just felt so natural to me. But I never took it that seriously. I was also very focused on being cool,
I thought you were saying focused on science.
No, I was focused on how to smoke cigarettes. I was like, how to impress idiot boys.
Yeah.
But yeah, I should have applied myself more. But when I was in high school, I was always doing school plays and things like that. And but when I was in high school, my cousins actually did some modelling, and they had like one of those like kid modelling agents, and I was like, oh, that sounds like fun. And my mum was never pushy, not a stage mum at all.
Yeah.
But
she also wasn't discouraging of you from trying
she was always
things,
very, very encouraging for me to do whatever, which was so great. Sometimes a little too much freedom. Probably needed a bit more discipline, but I'm very grateful for the freedom that I had. But I auditioned for this agent, and look, my cousins were very modelly kids, but I was a bit more of a little troll doll of a kid. So they were like, maybe she won't do modelling, but she could do.
All that
I was like, cute, but I wasn't in those days. I wasn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they were like, we do child actors as well. So I read. The agency was called Linda's Rising Stars, and I read a scene from Home and Away or something, and I felt so good. I loved it, and they kept me. They signed me, and so I did like little acting jobs. Yeah. My first job, I was 13, and I did a role on Blue Heelers.
Yeah.
With William McGuinness, actually, who I'm working with now on the
on
newsreader,
the
which is
newsreader.
so funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I had little roles here and there, guest roles, and I loved it. It was so
Did
fun.
he remember you?
No, you know what? I only remembered this weekend.
Oh.
So I've got to tell him on Monday when I go to work, when I go to set. But yeah, I was doing little jobs, and I loved it, but I don't think I really realised how, again, I took it for granted. And then I wanted to study fashion and do all these other things. But then when I was 21, when I was kind of partying and just being a 21-year-old, my mum passed away quite quickly. She had cancer, and it was a really big, obviously a big experience for me, losing, and because she raised me, and it was one of those things that just made me realize how short life is, and to take my life, to kind of pull my finger out really, and really commit to something. And so I studied acting, and I studied acting in Australia, and I went to New York as well, and I really took myself seriously and applied myself, and it just made me not waste time, because life is short and you've got to live fully. So and then like I said with that story about my web series, I was doing acting roles after I studied, and I was traveling, but it wasn't till I was about 26, 27 when my web series kind of got bigger, and when I did Sisters. I think I did Sisters when I was 27, 28. Yeah. And that really, that kind of really solidified my career.
Did you have to subsidise your career at all with something else?
Yeah. In my, when I was writing my web series and through, when I was studying acting, I was a shampoo girl at a hair salon. I've done lots of funny jobs. Yeah. I loved that. But once I finished studying, I was really lucky to get a job teaching drama to young kids and teenagers, which was it paid enough to that I could, and it felt very creative and in line with what I cared about and what I was passionate about, and I think it actually helped me form better habits and be a better artist. So I taught for years. And, I still occasionally, I lecture at Collarts, or, I really like teaching. So I did that for years, and that was supplementing my income. But I've been lucky enough now that for the last, 6 years, maybe more, 7, 8 years, that I've just been able to be an artist. Yeah. 100%, which I'm aware is such a privilege, and I'm so proud of myself. Yeah. It's great, particularly in Australia.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I was very fortunate, maybe it could be 5 or 6 years ago now, that I was picked up by an organisation called Entertainment Assist. Mm-hmm. So they're not for profit, that look after the mental health of the Australian entertainment industry. So they did world first research into the industry. So I grabbed the research and created programs for the industry. And so I was very fortunate, which is why I ended up with an agent myself, because in order for me to get on set to see what it was actually like, you have to have an agent. And, pulling apart that research, I've never been so overwhelmed with almost vicariously traumatic grief for the industry.
Yeah.
And just how people so commit. And then, you watch the other side of it, and I'm probably jumping around a bit, but you look at how we can consume streaming services. We'll binge a series in a night and just go, oh, well, that was shit, and then go on. And you go, oh, my gosh, if you only knew how much work went into that by individuals who are putting their lives and incomes and, prosperity on the line to produce that for you. Just be a bit more grateful.
It's wild when you think of how much work, how much human power, care, blood, sweat and tears go into making something. It's kind of amazing to even fathom how we make anything sometimes, and particularly with the limited budgets and times and constraints, particularly in Australia.
And the misunderstanding of how budgets are created through, I think Sue Maslin as well. I did some work with her along the way too, and that was particularly with the show Must Go On, which is the Ben Steele production. Worked with Ben on that. And, and then COVID was happening at the same time. And I know you studied a little bit at 16th Street with Kim.
Yeah.
So Kim came onto my radar as well. And, just sort of seeing just how people just remained so committed, even during that time, to their detriment as well. So I think, anyone that's listening, just be bloody mindful.
Yes, it's really, and look, I know I am aware that actors do get a lot of praise and appreciation, get treated like, we get a lot of revere as well. That's the one industry where we finish our job and everyone stands up and claps. I'm like, we don't do that at the baker. Or like, I'm aware that.
Yum.
I'm aware that we do get a lot of
but
adoration.
Conversely, you get.
But at the same time, we get there is a lot of it's something
critical
that
acclaim,
does,
they call it.
Yeah, and people, it is something that looks much easier than it is. It is really hard, and you wouldn't be in this industry. I think a lot of people go into the industry thinking it's going to be easy, fun, get a lot of money and attention, but you wouldn't stay in the industry if you didn't like working hard and you didn't really care, because it is just really hard. You
still have to go for screen tests.
Yes. Yeah.
So just like anyone.
So you audition a lot. You're put down. Often I do self-tape, so I'll just film them. I've got a good setup at my place and film them with a friend, but you're submitting self-tapes, which is often unpaid, and learning, pages of dialogue, like last week, 10 pages of dialogue. You just have to drop everything, learn it in a day. You're doing things like that. Do
you have a method of doing that?
I do. I think my brain, I've learnt so much dialogue over my life that my brain is just trained. I cannot remember why I came into the kitchen or who's
you almost came here on Saturday.
I can't remember literally anything, like where I put my sunglasses, even if they're on my head, but I can remember monologues like really easily. I don't know, my brain just does. I have one thing that saves me is I often record my dialogue into my phone, and I'll put my AirPods in and go walk the dog, and I think it must just look like I'm on a phone call or something and I'm just talking to myself. It is funny though when I'm walking the streets talking to myself and I'm like doing an American accent talking about a murder case or something because I'm auditioning for some cop character but that's a great way to do it. But I don't know, I think my brain's just trained. But it's a lot of work, or just being on set is kind of it's really fun. It's like my favorite thing. I love making new friends on set. I love the team effort of being on set because it is really, we're all just problem solving one thing, but from all different angles, and it's such a beautiful thing. And I just love being around so many creative people in one thing, but in one environment. But it also is really hard. I was doing night shoots last week, getting home at 3 a.m. You're doing really long hours. You're doing the same scenes over and over. It's a really hyper-focused work as well. You can't ever phone it in. Or there's a lot of pressure. You're often really uncomfortable. I just shot a movie where I played a pregnant woman and we were shooting in Perth in the peak of summer. So it was like 46 degrees or something. I'm wearing a massive rubber belly bodysuit, sweating where I couldn't even go to the bathroom without assistance. Like it's not as glamorous. It can be quite hard. So it's not, it is a lot of hard work. I don't want to make it, it's also really,
but you know
really
what
fun.
I would say that reminded me of a one I did last year or this year, but I was with my dog in the scene, and it was a summer scene, but this day was so wet and cold, really uncomfortable, and we had to do so many takes of this scene that Vincent actually started making love to another dog as we. It was like all of a sudden now he's got this sniff of this dog. Every take he would just want to jump on this dog, and it was like, oh, all the things. But I would just say that being on set as an extra, I mean, you would think that extras are nothing, but the way that we're treated is like gold.
Yeah,
it is just amazing. I don't think I get treated as well anywhere else in my life than I do when I'm doing extra work.
Yeah, it's a beautiful environment.
And the food's amazing.
I know, we love the catering. I'm all for a doggy bag on set. But it is a really amazing environment. It's almost military how it's run. There's all the heads of departments, then everyone, then they've got the people under them. Like, you've got the head of makeup and then all their makeup artists, and they report to them. And it's really structured, so organised. All the assistant directors, all the schedules, the amount of people and organisation. And then it's also a bit like we're carnies, we're in these trucks and tents and we're travelling around to different locations. And it's just so efficient, and there's so much care, and particularly now with, there's always an on-set nurse that's making sure everyone, is healthy, drinking, hydrated, all of that stuff. And there's intimacy coordinators, like you mentioned before, if you're doing intimate scenes, to make sure, everyone's looked after there. And even recently on the show we met on, this Netflix show, they had an on-set psychologist.
Yes.
Which is...
Which
amazing.
Was part of the work we were doing at Entertainment Assist to really advocate for that.
Yeah.
Because if you go to reality TV, just say
things
goodness. Like Married at First Sight, which is just so incredibly horrendous on the human condition. Yeah. If we could see the outcomes of that, those shows would actually be shut down.
I know. I think about, I'm sure in years to come, we'll all... it might be the similar thing of the Britney Spears thing. We're like, how did we let someone get treated like that in the public eye? And I think it'll be a similar thing. Yeah. As much as it's, look, I am a lover of trashy reality. I'm a housewives girly. Yeah. But there is an element with shows like that where it's not right. It feels and it's not humane. It's really awful. But I think it makes sense, particularly on a set when there's so many people working together. There is no real HR, and so having there's producers, and there's a lot more care, particularly post Me Too, and there's a lot more communication these days. But having a psychologist that is there for actors and the crew, the crew are there. They often like unit people, which are the people that set up all the makeup trucks and everything. They're there from 4 a.m. They're the first to get there, the last to leave.
And dealing with creative people. I shouldn't say that in inverted
commas. No, but just big personalities.
Yeah. I remember coming to set one day and I had this amount of makeup on because I'd been somewhere else.
You look beautiful, by the way, right?
Oh, thank you so much. I try. But I got to set and the makeup girl was like, oh, I love your makeup. It looks so good. How about we just wipe all of it off? Yeah, but it was done in such a way that, my feelings were so considered that I might be upset about that. Or, and how about we, you got any sunscreen on today? No, you don't. How do you feel about that? Yeah. I thought, oh, gosh, how lovely. Yeah. Because she could have said, what the F? What's all this shit on your face? Let's get that off. Why'd you wear that onto set? Yeah. That's probably in the olden.
Yeah, look, I
days.
have experienced touch doses of that.
Oh, okay.
But it's really not a thing these days, particularly in Australia. Yeah. Australia's just I think our industry here is too small to be a jerk. If you're a jerk, you're just not going to get work again. So we're all so grateful for work that everyone's lovely.
Well, it is such a small. Do you find that a lot of really good Australian actors will go offshore?
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing. And I think, and particularly with directors as well, some of our, great, particularly comedy directors, they'll get snatched up overseas. And it is hard because, and look, I've worked overseas and it's great. And I understand because there's much more opportunity, there's much more money. And it's just what happens with smaller industries. But it does mean when you do work on things here that there is much more of a family environment and people work really hard. Even in the film I shot in Perth early this year, it's even a smaller version of that because all the people, once they get to a certain level, they go over east, so the people that are left in Perth are often the really young ones that are really enthusiastic, but they haven't got enough money to move yet, or people that have come back and they've decided they only want to do things that they really care about. And so the crew on this set were amazing. They were so enthusiastic and conscientious and grateful and lovely. I loved it. It was amazing. So I think it can have a really positive impact on the people that do stay. But it is hard as well because there is a shortage of certain people or it is just tricky because.
But I think it's people like you, going back to right to the start of the show, and my experience of you is that you're the person that makes a difference, and people like you.
That's lovely.
Because it is when we say hard, again, having a son who was always going to be a chef since he was 3 years old. And I'm also a single parent. I've raised my kids alone too. They have fathers who are very good fathers, by the way. But just that, oh my God, he's going to be a chef. That's so hard.
Yeah.
And we confuse hard with being bad.
Yeah.
Whereas if things feel challenging for us, they're generally good.
Yeah.
And if we have that sort of cognitive dissonance in our brain where we go, oh, this feels like something that I can't decide upon, that's a great thing, because if you trust that, it will lead you into a place which might not be right, but if it's not, then that will lead you into another place, and so on. We just got to trust that we're going somewhere. Yeah,
being I think it should be, work should always, if you're doing what you love, it should be enjoyable, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. No. And I think doing hard things is really good for you. Often it's fortifying and it's strengthening and you grow. And I mean, in the time that it's happening, it's usually a terrible experience. Well, but if you I think if you persevere, I mean, obviously sometimes you can have limits and be like, this is too hard. But I think it should be, like being a chef. Like, I mean, being an actor, I'm sure the statistics show that there must be just so many out of work actors. Yeah. And it's, it's one of those things that is quite an aspirational job. So a lot of people want to do it.
But it's also difficult if you go upstream, and this is some of the stuff I worked on at Entertainment Assist. If you go into schools, creative arts are things that you do after school. Music, drama and stuff. It's subsidiary to the core stuff. But then you look at the world and how the world consumes entertainment. We need it for us to progress. So there's a real disparity between how we couch that. And then, of course, you meet so many parents who are like, look, that's not a real job.
Yeah.
Whereas, in fact, again, it serves the world in a way that is almost, it's not replaceable. So
it's quite disappointing. I think particularly in Australia. I think Europe are better at it. And maybe the entertainment industry in the States is toxic as it is sometimes, they do at least appreciate the importance of entertainment.
There's a lot of pride.
But in Australia, I mean, I'm not sure if it's still the same, but I know when I did my VCE, when you do artistic subjects, you actually get marked down. Even if you, I was the top of my class with my artistic subjects, but they weren't marked at the same level as STEM. If I was doing academic subjects, which is ridiculous.
But why isn't academic?
Well, that's the thing. It makes absolutely no sense. I know it just feels, it's just because it's not as linear, I guess. It's hard to measure. But I mean, what got us through the pandemic? Watching TV. What like art is so important. It's just as important as everything else. And I don't
take it away. That's when human beings will know.
Exactly. And it's just, I don't want to be really precious, but it is really frustrating that it is, I was lucky enough, like I said, being raised by an artist in an artistic family home, that it was important.
Yes.
But I know most actors I know, their families or they've had people in their lives that have been like, yeah, but what are you really going to do with your life? Or what's your real job? Or not been supportive with it. And particularly Australia, we have such a tall poppy syndrome as well.
Status is everything.
Well, yeah, and it's just that thing of like, well, what have you been in? Or if someone is a successful artist, it's pulling them down. And it's really that's one thing that I love about when I'm in America. You tell people you're an artist or an actor and they're like, amazing.
Yes.
There's no kind of judgment with it. So it is something that is, it's I don't know why, and it's so frustrating, and
because it's a fear-based,
I think so,
for people that are raising us. We don't want somebody not to prosper.
Yeah.
So therefore that's quite a risky, because the statistics say there's only a certain amount of roles for actors or producers or film people, whatever.
Yeah.
We do have to go to a break though, Maria, because we're about 15
Oh, my
minutes
goodness,
over.
we could just go forever.
Rory, my son, the other day goes to me, he goes, you've I don't know why I laugh at this, because Mum, you've got a degree in yaponomics.
That's a pretty good word to say, yaponomics.
Yaponomics. I went, oh. He goes, oh, you get on the phone to George, you get on the phone to Rosie. Yap, 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 yappity yap. So now we're up to our next very special guest song request. You must be really excited about this one because it's another cryptic clue.
Uh-huh.
This one's hard, Maria. You have to change tracks in your mind.
Okay.
The clue is it pertains to something sharp or witty. Or witty, not and witty. Sharp or witty.
Oh, I don't know. Sharp or witty. I don't.
What would, like, something that might be a knife, another word for a knife, or something that's clever or cleave. Cleave. I'm not giving you the...
yeah. I. You know what it is? I've forgotten.
It's cleave.
What songs are on my.
Clever. It's clever.
I'm clever. Erica Badu, I'm clever. There you go.
That's the
Thank
one,
you for
clever.
giving that to me.
So witty being clever.
Clever.
Sharp being... How cool is that?
I love that I didn't get the word clever. That just says a lot about me.
When we come back, we'll have a little chat about industry supports, like WIFT, Women in Film and TV, that kind of stuff. You mentioned Screen Australia, just what roles they play as well, and how they've supported you. So don't go away, people. You are listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC, and here is Clever by
Erica Badu.
There you go. I love the song.
Oh, it's a great song.
Don't go away. Oh, God, that was a pretty abrupt stop, wasn't it? Welcome back, everyone. The time is almost 20 minutes past 11 and you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC with Rae Bonney, and I'm joined by Maria Angelico. You'll know her from watching her on the telly and all the other screens that we use these days. So there you go. What does it feel like being you today, Maria?
It feels pretty good. I feel like I'm pretty grateful and happy to be here and to be where I'm at in my life. Yeah.
Where are you at in your life?
I don't know. Just I've had a really busy year. Just finished shooting a film, and I've now currently in the middle of shooting season 3 of The Newsreader.
I know. Do you know what's really funny?
Yes.
Is Paula Hogg, who's coming on next for a lazy Sunday afternoon. Her and I are all day at The Newsreader on Wednesday, I think.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not on Wednesday. Bummer. But that'll be a great day. I know what scenes they're shooting. It'll be great.
Well, I don't know where it is yet. So, because they said, we don't know, just, you always, what's your size? You wouldn't want to be funny about how your body image, would you? Oh, my God. No. But we already did a scene together. And so this is something else. I don't know.
Oh, well, it'll be a great day.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it. It's. Have you been on the set of The Newsreader before?
No, but I watch it. I love it.
It's a great show, and it's got a really beautiful team. Michael Lucas, who is the the head writer and showrunner, is a good friend of mine, and he's just such an incredible human.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And Emma Freeman, who is the director, she's directed every episode.
Mia's sister.
No. No, don't get that confused. But Emma is one of the best directors I've ever worked with. She's an incredible human.
Do you know what I love about this show?
Yeah.
And you might, in my acknowledgement of country that I do everywhere I go, is somewhat inspired by the newsreader in series 1. I was working on the 42nd floor of the ANZ Tower in the city when the first Fleet reenactment happened. Yeah, wow. And they covered that in the newsreader when that happened, but the other side of it from how our Indigenous people saw that. And I cried in that episode because the shame that I felt, that I remember watching going, oh, my God, this is so amazing. Not a thought I had because we weren't told.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of my favourite episodes of the series. It's so cleverly crafted how it does highlight, just the ignorance, and it is, but it's of that time. Like no one really, the same with January 26th these days. Like when I was younger, it was just like, oh, it's a public holiday. Like we just didn't.
Oh, we've got every right to be Australian.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, and I think the show explores it. It's such a clever show. It's so really amazing. Yeah. I'm so grateful to be
what role do you play?
A small part of it. I play Cheryl, the makeup artist. Cheryl's, she's light. She's great. I really, they shot season 1. It was never meant to go to more seasons. It was just a mini series. Yeah. But we shot it in the middle of 2020 lockdown. It was one of the only shows that was able to shoot in Melbourne. And Michael Lucas was like, do you want to be? He's like, it's a very small role, but I'd love to have you part of it. And I was like, I need to get out of the house. Yes. Yeah. And so, but I'm so glad I said yes to playing Cheryl because she's really developed over the seasons, and she's such a beautiful character. And it's one of those dream jobs of it's just such a beautiful cast, such a beautiful crew. It's always the same people that come back every time, and it's heaven. So I think you'll have a great time on Wednesday.
Oh yeah. And always. I don't think I've had a bad experience at all. I think during COVID, I did a Wog Boy during COVID. I actually had a line, which was like pretty fancy. I never watched it, but and I did the last 2 episodes of Wentworth, which
fabulous.
was really cool.
Yeah, great.
That was really great. I was dealing with the freak.
How good.
So good.
What a great show.
Oh, look. But anyway, it's not about me because we are like racing. Like we've only got 26 minutes left of the show. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the industry supports because I think we do support quite well here in Australia, not just for entertainment, but if you think about support pathways for people that are free, and I'm not just talking about mental health, but what I came across in the entertainment industry, the Arts Wellbeing Collective, WIFT, which is Women in Film and TV, Screen Australia, Support Act. Yeah. Do you think there's too many that are all fragmented that kind of do similar things?
No, I think. I mean, I don't. I that's just. I haven't really thought about it that much. But I don't think they're. I think we can never have enough support. I think it's great. I think it's more just about it being aware of it because I think a lot of people still aren't fully aware of all of the help and resources that are out there. Look, I think it's great. Even, the Union Actors Equity MEAA, they do a really good job also of informing artists of the support that's there as well. Look, I think it is... it is an interesting thing. I think Australia's just in general, like even having our healthcare system and, the mental health care plans that are available and, I don't know what other country, I'm sure there are, but it feels quite rare. When I was living in America, it's like, oh no, everyone has to pay for everything. To have all of these resources available is really helpful. I still feel like in our Australian culture, there's still a bit of a stigma with asking for help. I feel it's that whole she'll be right kind of mentality.
Do you think particularly in your industry as well?
No, I think artists are usually, I think where it's like, because I mean, a big part of our job is connecting emotionally and being, you have to understand. It's almost like, all the tools in our toolbox are our feelings. So we have to kind of know how to utilize them and understand how they work.
Do you draw a lot on your personal experience?
No, yes and no. I think that's something that I think we could talk about more in the industry. I think there's a lot of training and particular techniques, and there's schools of thought where people do use their trauma to bring emotions to scenes, which, I mean, whatever makes it work is fine, but I think it can be quite dangerous territory, particularly if you haven't processed that trauma or if,
Because does that show the Kaminsky method with Michael Douglas, where he explores all of that about bringing so much of self?
Yeah, and look, I have done it. I've been through a lot of stuff, and I mean, all of us, birds fly, fish swim, humans feel, like we all have feelings. Yes. But sometimes I think it can be dangerous if let's say you're going to really dark places, you're doing really long days on set, you're in that dark place thinking about or experiencing the emotional trauma of something that is real to you, and then you wrap at the end of the day, you go home. How do you deal with all of that
especially
that you've churned up?
Especially if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and there's no one around.
Exactly, and then you have to go back the next day, and what if you have to put your kids to bed? Or I just think there's I think it's dangerous territory. I think for me, I mean, I've done both ways. For me, I find that just thinking about the actual scenario of the story can get me emotionally there, thinking about I had to give birth in this movie that I just did.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I should mention. Anyway, but I thought about all the women that have just given birth, and that can get you there. You don't need to draw on human trauma or this whole kind of narrative of like the tortured artist. I think it can be quite dangerous, and particularly if you haven't processed it. I'm a big advocate for therapy. I've done therapy for years and years and years, and I think the more I understand my emotional landscape, the more available and open I am to express that as an artist. And I think in the past, when I've tried to use certain things I've been through in my work, I think it can, it doesn't have a great impact, because then I've brought up something that I haven't been able to deal with, or then I'm feeling triggered for the rest of the day. And so I think the support in that area, and look, some people use it and it's fine, but it just really depends.
Well, I think it's our responsibility, it's our personal responsibility to manage our health and well-being.
Yeah.
So wherever you go in the world, whatever occupation you have, yes, it's an organisation's responsibility or an environment responsibility to create one that supports good mental health, safety and well-being, but it's what you bring yourself that's your responsibility.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely is. And also, I mean, I've lost my train of thought, but there's this thing of like, if you're bringing up these feelings, your mind knows that I'm bringing up feelings from my past, or I'm thinking about this awful experience or whatever. But your body, I think, sometimes doesn't know that. Your body is still in flight or fight or
well, probably about 100% of what we operate on at all times, maybe 98%, is our unconscious.
Yeah.
And our subconscious. So we're always pulling data from a previous experience. So people don't understand that, every original experience we have, we draw on data to make sense of it. So
I think you've just got to be careful. I don't know. But
tell me about intimacy on sex, because this is like, I'm a bit of a voyeur on sex, love a bit of sex.
Oh, it's such a bizarre
I was watching one
thing.
this morning. It's called 3 Women or something.
Oh, yeah. I've read the book.
Oh,
by Lisa Tadeo.
Yeah.
I want to see the show. Is it good?
Well, I've just like negated it for a while.
Yeah, okay. It's heavy.
Yeah. Well, it's actually really good. And there's a sex scene which involves, so much stuff.
I think I know.
Yeah.
From the book.
And I mean, that's really cool that's shown like that.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking about what it must be like for the actors, because he was very visible, every part of him. Yeah. And same with her. So look,
I've done a few sex scenes over my career, and
Like when you pash on with somebody, do you have to like pash on without any...
Yeah, look, I've done scenes with intimacy coordinators and without. Earlier in my career, one of the most vulnerable naked sex scenes I've done was without an intimacy coordinator. Yeah. But I think I've been pretty lucky to have pretty safe environments even without intimacy coordinators. But it's hard. You want to...
How does your boyfriend go though?
John, he's fine. He's whatever. I think once... It is...
Might get him on
doing
and ask him, actually.
Doing a sex scene or an intimate scene on set is the most unsexiest thing you'll ever do in your life. Yeah. You're like on set, you're making friends with everyone, you've got nicknames with all the crew, and then all of a sudden you rock up one day and you're half dressed and you have to do this sensitive scene.
Like in it? Or?
But like it's all the crew that are there that you kind of, everyone's trying to be respectful and not saying anything, and it's just so awkward. Look, you wardrobe are a big part of it. You usually have lots of meetings in pre-production with directors and or an intimacy coordinator or wardrobe or all three of them to discuss what you're comfortable with. Even before you sign your contracts, your agent will say yes, no, or there's a nude scene or whatever. Yeah. But, there's particularly with women, I think they're very well looked after these days,
Why particularly with women?
Because I think maybe...
So I have to ask that.
I think in the past it's been... the other way. I think women have, you hear horror stories about women saying no to nudity and not getting jobs and, and I think, I think it's also just a lot of sex scenes depicted on film and screen are usually not, how do you put it? Often they're not positive experiences for women the story-wise, we've seen lots of women get raped on TV, like we don't need to see all that over and over. Yeah. So I think there is just a lot of protection. But usually it's really a dialogue. Yeah. But often...
Thanks for answering that, by the way.
That's all right.
I think you really articulated that well.
Yeah, but I think... I think it's a really open dialogue about what you're comfortable with, and and it's really choreographed often. Like it's like almost like a dance or like a stunt. You have to treat it like a stunt. You've got a coordinator there being like, okay, you sit on them there, then they're going to turn you around there and you're going to touch there, and it is like a stunt or a dance, and it's not sexy. The hardest part is making it look natural when you're... Because also you're so vulnerable. The other actor or actors you're working with are so vulnerable, and you've just got to communicate. Yeah. My biggest thing is I often get the giggles because it's so funny. You're kind of trying to be all serious, and then you've got like a boom operator holding a mic just trying to be respectful, and you're like, I've chosen to do this with my life. What the fuck am I doing? This is ridiculous. But I've been pretty lucky. I know there's other, people have had negative experiences. I've had some uncomfortable ones where I've had to kind of put my hand up. And, when you are kissing, like you asked before, if you have to kiss an actor passionately,
you've got to do all the bits.
If you're not really close up, like if it's a really tight, close-up lens, yes, you might have to use tongue, but usually you don't. A lot of it is kind of miming and faking. But
is it that awkward moment, like just say, one actor has an expectation of the other and one crosses the line? Is there ever
usually
like that?
I think unless it's something super amateur, there is communication. You say, we're going to do this, we're not going to do this, touch me here, can I touch you there? And so there's no unknowns, because I think that's when you can get into dangerous territory or just feel embarrassed. Yeah. It is hard also if you're really just not attracted to the other actor, or the opposite, you're really attracted to the other actor and you're like embarrassed, which I've had both those scenarios, and you just have to kind of, you're like, this is just a job. It's just, and it's...
Well, chemistry is a thing.
Yes.
And we forget that it doesn't matter how professional you are, if one of those, pieces of chemistry comes alive, whether it's repulsion or the other, it's there.
And you have to override it. But it's the same with any other acting, sometimes you have to act like you're angry, but you're not angry, or vice versa, like you're in love and you're having a terrible day. It is just... You do have to just remind yourself sometimes, like, yes, we are just playing pretends. This is just, we're just faking it. But it is a really interesting thing. And I think intimacy coordinators are such an amazing addition to the industry.
Like, when were they introduced? Because it's been a little while.
I think it's a post-Me Too era thing. So not that long. I feel like only the last few years have I worked with them. So maybe the last 2-3 years.
Okay.
And I think there's starting to be more qualified intimacy coordinators in Australia, but I think for a long time there was only a couple of them.
Yeah.
So there was, all of that, there just weren't enough going around.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine is one, she lives in the States and she's busy all the time. So it's such a fascinating job. Yeah. It's amazing. And it's great because
I imagine it'd be quite beautiful, really, to choreograph something like that.
Oh, it's amazing. And it's their job.
One of the most natural things human beings do.
Exactly. And it's their job to really advocate for the actors because it is hard, particularly if you're dealing with a director that you're not super comfortable with or one that has a very particular idea. And it's so hard to be like, I'm not comfortable with this or I am okay with this. And so the intimacy coordinator is almost like a translator with what the actor's comfortable with, but then they also help with the choreography to make it just look really real.
Yeah.
There's amazing intimacy coordinator, Amy, in Melbourne that I've worked with. And Amy was, like really kind of giving permission. I had to do this kissing scene that was quite passionate. And Amy's like, well, why don't you grab his butt or like do this or do that, and in a way, because of Amy's enthusiasm, it gave us permission to really have fun and rather than being like, oh, I would as my character, but I don't want to be creepy as the actor or, they kind of just get rid of any of the
awkwardness.
Yeah. And it was really fun. It's a great scene.
Yeah. Be paying particular attention now.
No, it's a great job. I think, you have to be a particular kind of person to do it, but I think it's
how
really
critical are you
job.
when you're watching productions back? You're watching other actors do your craft.
I'm not. Look, it's hard because I know the kind of behind the curtain.
Because you might know the people as well.
Yeah, I often know the people.
Yeah.
Or the directors or the producers or whatever. Or sometimes I'm watching a show that I've auditioned for and I didn't get the part. And I'm going, oh,
I'd be so much better.
Well, look, sometimes I'm going, I'd be better. Or sometimes I'm going, oh, they made the right decision. I'm pretty good at watching myself. I think I've gotten over that. When I was younger, I used to be so hard on myself. I'd watch something and I'd be like really critical or really not positive about how I looked or, all of those things. But I'm good at separating myself now and watching. And when I watch other actors, I think... I'm probably critical in some ways, but I think I'm also probably really understanding of going, oh, that would have been so hard to film that, or no one really knows how fussy that director is or how tricky those scripts were. Or so I think a bit of both. I'm sure my partner and my friends get annoyed with me talking through things sometimes because I'm like, oh, they would have had to shoot that like that, or they must have because
the dolly wasn't going in the right
direction. Exactly. I'm like pointing out certain things, but I still have the ability. I mean, even with the Newsreader, it's a show that I'm in that I'm also such a big fan of.
Yeah.
And I can just watch it as an audience member and I don't seem to get that distracted. So I'm pretty good at separating.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good to know because that perspective, because it is acting and it's not real. And I'm watching Curb Your Enthusiasm as well.
God, it's a good show.
And I just think, just the way that is produced is just... Oh, I don't know, takes my breath away. It's so clever.
It's so clever. I think a lot of that's improvised, that show.
Yeah. And you see it. You see the improvisation, but you see where it comes from. And you can see that, especially when Jerry Seinfeld is interacting with Larry, that they've got this relationship already.
They're so comfortable. Yeah. It's great. I mean, look, I love watching things back. There's certain jobs that I've done. There's a couple of shows where I haven't been able to watch too much of it because I knew I didn't do my best or, so it's hard to watch or
what is not your best?
Oh, just when, and I'm pretty good at not being too hard on myself. I've done a lot.
Would it be that maybe you don't connect with the character as much as you might with another character? Or?
I think usually it's when I don't advocate for myself. So if, let's say I'm on set and I do a take and for whatever reason I know I could have reached further or taken a different approach and then the director moves on and I don't ask for another take or because often you trust the director but sometimes I could try to do this better or I'd like to and it is hard to ask for another take because you're holding up
everyone.
Yeah. And so it's times when I haven't done that, or maybe I didn't speak up earlier about something that then impacted the scene. Or I didn't ask for something. So it's usually when I don't speak up for myself, because I know that's something that's within my control.
Yeah.
So that's why that's why I feel like I did my best, I think.
Have you done much stage?
Yeah,
because you don't get 2 chances of that one.
No, I think being on stage in theatre makes you a better actor. I think I haven't done that much of it. I did a big long tour back in 2017 of a play, a national tour. And then in 2022, I wrote, in COVID, I wrote a one-woman show and performed it at the Malthouse Theatre.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and that was, I think, one of the most hardest, scariest things I've ever done in my life, but so rewarding. I wrote, produced it and co-directed it.
What was that about?
It was about the impact of my father's absence. Yeah, but it was comedy. It's dark as it sounds. It was a tragic comedy. Yeah. But yeah, it was such a rewarding experience. It was called The Disappearing Act, and it was told in the metaphor of because my father actually is a magician, a career magician, but it was told in the metaphor of a magic show where the assistant's there and the magician doesn't turn up, and it's her kind of navigating how to entertain and keep the audience and stay there without the magician, which is a metaphor for me navigating my life. And it was
clever.
It was look at my dad. That's one thing my dad gave me is a lot of material.
Does he have a chance to see your work?
No, but look, it was a great experience, and look, I don't think he saw it. I don't really have a relationship with him now, but it wasn't really about him. It was about the impact of his absence.
So, but I think those things, because, we see, a lot of kids that have grow into adults with attachment issues and things like that can really make sense of how they're feeling through work like that.
Yeah. And look, I've always leaned into doing that. You've got to be careful, because particularly sharing personal things, even though I did have characters, I wasn't really playing myself, and I wasn't really talking about my father. It was all metaphor, but you still have to protect yourself when you're talking about personal stuff. But it can be so cathartic. For me, it was really big personally to just be able to put my experiences and some traumatic stuff and some big stuff into art. It was great. I'm all for it. Art therapy.
Thank you, COVID, for allowing that.
Yeah, I know. Never, ever would have. I know when a friend of mine was like, you should do a one-woman show, I said, no way. That is my biggest nightmare. Yeah. And then I did it. But, COVID. Yeah. There you go.
So many good things.
Yeah.
It's an interesting space, being a public speaker. And I remember the first time I ever spoke, and it was at the convention centre in front of 1,000 people.
Oh, my goodness.
And George was quite young at the time, and he came along, and, he's one of my biggest supporters. And I wrote this script, and I had a couple of months to prepare, and I had to speak for an hour. So it's a long time to speak in your first gig. I wrote and perfected it, and oh my gosh. And by the time I got up there and I delivered it, and I had to keep referring to my notes, I almost passed out. But when I got off the stage, George kind of caught me. Why did I say catched? Anyway, he caught me. And I said to him, I will never do that again. And he said, well, no, you've got to keep doing it because you're good at it. And I said, no, I'm never going to write a script again. If it doesn't come from here and it doesn't come from here, then it's not just, it just
it doesn't come from your head and your heart.
Never again.
I think there's a certain element of trust when you're going off script and speaking from your gut. There's a trust that you're enough and you can.
But also
deliver.
Trust that sometimes things just don't come out.
Yeah, and that's
well.
okay.
Like I mentioned, I was expelled from school when I was 15. So my vocabulary is really quite, well, it's not limited, but there's gaps in it. There's big holes in it. Yeah. So I'll be speaking it and I know what I want to say, but I don't actually have the word for it. So I'll just go, I actually don't have that word.
Yeah.
I'll just have to keep moving.
And it's human. We're all human. We all struggle to find words. I think there's something refreshing about it. We don't have to be perfect.
I know in this year 11 thing the other day, sort of started presenting, and so these girls just started chatting amongst themselves, and I just stopped and I said, it's really interesting. Is this how you guys kind of go in every class? Like, just have your own conversation?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious because I just need to know, do I need to speak louder than you?
Yeah.
Do I need to be more interesting,
Yeah.
around this thing? Just want to know, And they've all gone, oh, and they didn't say anything.
How cute. Oh, teenage girls.
Oh, but sometimes, you could be really flawed when you get a distraction.
Yeah.
Like that to go, well, I don't know what to do next. And I think in life that's somewhere we can be when we don't know what to do next, so we don't do anything.
Yeah, and being okay with actually not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
I think often we feel like we have to know. That was a big thing for me when I was younger. I really felt like I had to know everything, and maybe that is just a young mentality, but it's okay not to know what to do or what to say or who to talk to, or I think it's really freeing to just be like, I don't know. I don't have an answer.
I think we get worried about our thoughts too. And thoughts become other thoughts that become actions. It's the actions. Thoughts aren't bad only if they turn into actions that aren't good.
Yeah.
And, on the other morning, it must have been Thursday morning, I go walking at like really early in the morning, and it was really dark, and I'm walking along, this bird pops out in front of me. I'm like, oh, what do I do? So instinctively, I just put it in my jacket and I wrapped it up.
Oh, it's not wow.
No, it was just kind of limping along the thing. It was like a rosella or something.
Oh.
So I'm carrying it along in my jacket like this, and I got up the road a bit and I checked on it, and it popped out onto the ground. It sort of flew away, but then it just crashed again. So gone, because I'm by myself, I'm talking to this bird going, what are you doing? So I picked it back up again, but then it flew into the middle of the road into the traffic.
Oh, no.
So I'm watching this bird, and this is where that cognitive dissonance comes in, because I'm going, oh, well, you're going to get squashed, nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
Other side of my brain's going, I cannot have you die.
Stop the traffic.
So I got out into the middle of the road and trying to scoop it back. I couldn't get in, had to wait for the traffic. Fortunately, didn't get run over. Picked it up again. And I'm carrying it. So I had to carry it for an hour.
Oh, my goodness.
So gently in the pitch dark. And I got home. And all the way I'd planned where I was going to put it in an enclosure and what that was going to look like. I undid my jacket and it had gone. Like
it disappeared.
It wasn't in there. I don't know what happened. And it was just like, I always started crying, and it wasn't, I don't know if I was crying with laughter or it's like, where did you go? Like,
oh my goodness, you'll never know.
No, and Rose goes, did you go back? I said, there's an hour's walk back.
Oh my
in the
goodness.
dark. I don't know.
Oh, well.
But I guess, we should always follow what we feel is right at the time. It may not turn out like you expected.
No.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as you...
Yeah, you want to know that you listen to what you should do. And yeah.
We have gone way past the other break, so we've had to drop a song.
That's okay.
Which is great. But I did want to mention something. Number one, because we've talked about some uncomfortable things. So any listeners who are feeling uncomfortable about some of our conversation, especially around intimacy and sex, don't phone Lifeline for that, because, well, you can actually. But if you are feeling uncomfortable, Lifeline is there. And the number there is 131114. Suicide callback service is 1300 659 467. And emergency services for any emergency. That's what they're there for. 000. If you're in America, it's 999. Don't get confused by the tally. I'm going to be back on Sunday the 21st of April with another very special guest. Could be the Easter Bunny. I don't know. But you'll have to wait for that. But I wanted to speak about one of the show's greatest supporters. That's a guy called Mike Hagan. I think Mike's listening in at the moment. He's an extraordinarily outspoken Cumbrian. And if you're not familiar with Cumbria, it's very northern England, very, very northern. So he could be mistaken for a Scottish person. Anyway, we met a couple of years at a workplace burnout event in Melbourne at the Convention Centre. And he was the then general manager, human resources, corporate compliance at Robert Bosch in Oceania. Big role, big fancy role. And we were both speaking there, and I loved what he had to say and vice versa. Anyway, we got talking, and he said, I love what you do. I want to kind of do that. I want to quit my big corporate gig and do this kind of work. So, so we've been working with each other over the past year or so, probably a couple of years, and so he quit his job. Wow. And he is now on his when I say on his own, he's doing amazing work. He works workplace mental health, HR kind of advisory stuff, especially around psychosocial risk and hazards, which are all very current in our environments at the moment. He's an absolute expert in that, but he's also a musician. So, like, now I've got to get this right. Get your pencils out. If you want to go and see Mike and his band tonight, you probably don't because you live too far away. The Distant Conspirators, they're great, and they're at the Acorn Tavern at the Basin, not in your bathroom or your laundry. The Basin's near, like, Ferntree Gully,
right
out that way. It's at the foot of the Dandenong. It's a very beautiful place, but it's the part of the Basin Music Festival. So if you're not familiar with that part of town, get your Melways out. Mike will buy you a beer if you turn out. If you turn up. No, he didn't say that at all. Mike, if you do have anyone asking you for a beer, I'll subby that for you. But I think it's 7 p.m. at the Acorn Tavern in the Basin. Mike Hagan and the Distant Conspirators. If you need some HR advice there as well, ask Mike. He'll probably charge you for that though. So, Mike, just send me a text to let me know if I've spooked you enough. But look him up on his website. That was
cool.
Mike Hagan, consultant. I've run out of words, Maria. I can't do. I can't do this anymore.
You've done really well. Rae.
Oh, thank you. You seem to be everywhere. Like, you're in Western Australia, you're on the newsreader, you're doing your own stuff. You probably got friends and stuff as well. You're running the Keys bowling alley, which again, guys, is not a bowling alley. It's testament to heritage. It is the most beautifully restored place I've ever seen. The bowling alleys are made of...
They're old maple lanes. It's a lot of recycled, repurposed materials. It's a really, really beautiful place. It's family friendly. It's like a big, nice pub with a great beer garden, and you can go bowling. And there's arcades. It's great.
Yeah. But classy.
It is.
Not to take away from Strike or any of those
they're
bowling
all great.
alleys. They're all great, but this is just special. You go there and just go, wow. So Preston, isn't it?
It's in Preston, Plenty Road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't run it.
Did you help restore it? Like, did you rub back the boards or anything?
I did a little bit of staining of wood, and I did mainly emotional support for my partner, who just worked so hard. It's so hard, and it was all through the pandemic. It was a really difficult build, and yeah, there was a few moments where I was like, okay, we're going to have to live in a half-built bowling alley for the rest of our lives.
You lived there?
No, but we almost did, because we were like, this is costing a lot of money. This is terrifying. But no, I did mainly emotional support and a little bit of, I did some grouting and things, but I'm really not good with the handyman stuff, but it was fun.
Yeah. Well, you probably learned a few things, especially about corking, maybe.
Yes. And I'm a great bowler now. I actually went bowling last night with some of the cast from the newsreader, and I absolutely destroyed. I I did really well. I mean, I have reasons because I go bowling often, but I won by a mile, so it felt pretty good.
But it's one of those things. It's like playing pool. You have your good nights and your bad nights. We're a family of bowlers and mini golfers, and sometimes real golf. But I took Rory the other day. I got 4 strikes in a row.
That's amazing. That's a good game.
Amazing.
That's great.
So I was pretty thrilled with that. Yeah, so you can't probably talk about your project.
Look, I'm pretty grateful to have had a really busy last few months. I just finished on this film Birthright, directed and written by Zoe Pepper, which will come out next year, and I'm so excited about it. It's a drama comedy thriller about the housing crisis. It's boomers versus millennials. It's very, very clever and funny. So we just wrapped on that, and I'm really excited about that. I'm shooting the Newsreader season 3 currently, which
alongside me, co-starring.
Oh yes. Unfortunately, we won't be. I'm not shooting Wednesday. That's my day off.
I'm playing ironically a mental patient. We were at Larundel last time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that will be fabulous. And then I'm going on shooting season 2 of Strife, which will be
how exciting.
Which will be really fun. And then I don't know, I might just have a little holiday. I might just have a little rest because it's been a busy little time. But yeah, no, I've got a few things. I've got show in development, and I've always got things on the go. But yeah, no.
Oh, that's amazing.
What do they say? Booked, busy, and blessed.
I've not heard that, but I like
Well,
it.
there you go.
I like it. People say to me, "Oh gosh, it's so busy." I'm never busy. I just have a lot of really interesting things to do all the time.
Yes.
That's
me
all.
too.
So
yeah.
But we do have to wrap the show. Paula's not here yet, but she should be here any moment. She comes on public transport for her lazy Sunday afternoon.
Love that.
She lugs all of her CDs in, so she's very,
great.
very old school. But it's a great 2 or 3 hours of just really relaxing, cool music.
Awesome.
Produced by Paula. So we have some choices here because, in fact, if Paula's really late, we can play all the rest of your songs. So here goes, Maria. For our final guest song request, it won't be easy because the last 2 pertain to your name.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. So the last one pertains to the name that you use just about everywhere.
Okay. Is that the clue? Is it I Care For You by the
That's
Marias?
the one.
Oh
yes, because the other choice would have been I Am What I Am by Gloria Gaynor. Gaynor.
And Gloria is my middle name.
And
so
Linda
there you
Ronstadt.
go. Ah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So Paula is here. Welcome, Paula. And I know Paula wants to say hello to you as well, being fellow newsreader cast. But thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm a bit overwhelmed by everything because it's just, we could have gone for ages.
Yeah, I think we're both the same kind of chatterboxes.
We've got that degree.
We do.
In Yaponomics. Thanks, Rory, for that one. Coin that. So I will see you guys next month. And until then, it really is okay to not be okay. And even just ask somebody, what does it feel like being you today? We are over and out.